The night before my leaving cert, I got a phone call. My grandmother made a phone call to my mother and asked if Jason wanted to play golf with Christy O'Connor Jr. For non-golfers, that's a big deal. He hit probably one of the most iconic shots in the Ryder Cup history, a big name in Irish golf, etc. as well in sport.
Hello and welcome to the Gross Profit Podcast. My name is James Kennedy, CEO, co-founder at procurementexpress.com. We take the hassle out of managing SMB spend with magical features, but we're not here to talk about that today. Instead, I've got Jason Andrews from FloQast. Jason has an interesting career. He had exceptional experience in finance and accounting, working at Twilio, one of the most standout breakout successes for any startup in the last 15 years. Literally did it all, reached the top, and then decided to walk across the corridor into the marketing department in his current role at FloQast. So we're going to run a thread through that decision, what it's like to transition so radically, let's say. Maybe it's not as radical as you might think. And we're also going to hit on a couple of topics like process improvement, what it really takes to scale a team from tens to hundreds of people along the way. But before I get stuck into that, Jason, why don't you open up by telling us something about you that not many people know?
Yeah, firstly, thanks, James, for having me. Something that people might not know, the night before my leaving cert, so in Ireland, we have a leaving cert, which is the last exams you do before you hit into your college years. The night before my leaving cert, I got a phone call. My grandmother made a phone call to my mother and asked if Jason wanted to play golf with Christy O'Connor Jr. For non-golfers, that's a big deal. He hit probably one of the most iconic shots in the Ryder Cup history, a big name in Irish golf, etc. as well in sport. Got the phone call. I gave my mother an ultimatum. She didn't want me to go playing golf the night before leaving cert. English paper 1. Basically gave her an ultimatum and said, I'm not doing the leaving cert tomorrow if I don't get to play golf with this guy. He was such a legend. He's one of these icons when you're growing up. So it was an opportunity I couldn't say no. And I would have been a very studious guy, but I was still not giving up that opportunity. So yeah, that's something people probably wouldn't know. So I got to play 9 holes with my cousin and him the night before the leaving cert, and it was brilliant. And it's funny, we played the back 9 and he duck hooked 2 balls out of bounds on the 18th hole and I drove it straight up the fairway as a 16, 17-year-old as well. So nice memories.
Very good. So a bit of risk taking straight away in your background there. And tell us, did you manage to pass the leaving cert? Because the leaving cert's a terrible exam. It's, if you don't know, if you're not from Ireland, it's like the be all and end all. You have 2 weeks basically to define whether you get into college or not. And it's a fierce pressure, as they'd say. So it took a lot of guts to walk away from that to go play golf. Did it pay off?
Yeah, it was probably the exact thing I needed. Being like any teenager, you're obviously dealing with anxiety and stuff because it's such a build up in your life. It feels like everything leads towards leaving cert when you're in school. And yeah, everything went well and got there and got into college in University of Limerick a couple of months later as well. So all worked out in the end. It was probably the perfect little break from sitting down studying for hours the night before that I needed.
Amazing story. So you have some pretty big brand names on your CV. We'll skip through a couple of these and we'll get into Twilio. So just tell us about what was your first job, and then you went on, you had some other interesting stops along the way.
Yeah, I guess my career started early. It doesn't make it to my LinkedIn, but I grew up in family business as well. So my parents had petrol stations down in Bantry in West Cork. And so from the age of 8 to 9, I started working there, doing stuff that probably is illegal these days. You're not allowed to have kids working, but started there and grew up loving business. And just that was where I suppose I got my inclination that I liked the finance and accounting side of the world, even from that age, spending time with the family. But from there, did leave and started, went to University of Limerick, did a bachelor business degree. So like your standard overall business course, which involved everything from accounting to marketing to finance to IT, etc. as well. So it gave me a great base and confirmed what I thought before I started, that I was more into the numbers side of the game. And it was where my strengths lied as well. And basically from there, got the opportunity to go to join Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton were going through quite a lot of growth at that time. So spent 5 years circa there, working on audits, doing a lot of consulting work, did a lot of work with the central bank as well. The credit union industry was going through a lot of upheaval. So some of my work for a couple of years was actually inspecting those and dealing with mergers and acquisitions, even a lot around the Dublin area, etc. as well, and making sure we were in a time in the recession and coming out of it that some of these businesses weren't viable. So my job was to give advice and that, come in for a week, do an inspection, come away with recommendations on how they can survive and thrive. From there, then got the opportunity, as you mentioned, of a few big logos, spent some time in Yahoo. First job outside practice side, really cool company, very different, being the first step into tech. It's just a different world in terms of you have all the free stuff, the free food, the pool tables, the TVs, the game consoles. To be honest, you don't get to use them because you're so busy, because these companies are such fast growing, but they're lovely to have there. And obviously having your free benefits, you're not going to say no to. So yeah, I spent a couple of years doing like accounting work there, US GAAP and local accounting work there, and helping them with audits, etc. And then moved on to pre-IPO company, GC Aesthetics. So spent a couple of years there. They were going for IPO at the time. Sadly, it didn't work out, but I did a lot of work on their technical accounting side. It's a big step taking a private company to be able to list on the stock exchange. We got all the boxes ticked. Financially, it just didn't work out on the day. There was things happening in some key markets that they pulled out, but it meant the company went into a different direction. But that also opened doors for my career in terms of revenue and AR manager. Cash obviously became king for a company that thought they were getting a windfall of money and building towards a different future. So I learned a lot in that role as well, of like how to help a company through that, where cash is tighter than you'd planned and it's just going in a different direction. So built a lot of really good experience there. And from that role, the Twilio role came up. They reached out to me. I'd never heard of Twilio at that time. To be honest, a lot of people in Ireland and the world probably have never heard of Twilio, but everyone uses them probably on a daily basis without even thinking about it. All your modern, huge companies that you use and tools and apps that you use these days, they're powering them. Your likes of your Netflix, your Airbnb, your Uber, WhatsApp, all those little authentication codes you get from the different apps that you log into, be it your bank account, etc. Twilio a lot of time is the company that's in the background sending you those codes. So every one of those codes that gets sent is worth a few cents or dollars, etc., to companies as well. So really powerful company, fascinating company to get to join at a time where it was just growing incredibly. It grew. So I joined in 2019. It grew revenues $650 million in 2018 to it's going to be in around 4 billion something in 2024. So just incredible
story.
Incredible growth.
Yeah. So you said something interesting there I want to skip back to, which is you went from, it sounds like going into some of these businesses that needed a look at, let's say, and then straight from that around Dublin, probably not very glamorous in the industrial states of Dublin maybe, and dingy offices around the place, to something like Yahoo. And it reminds me of something my father-in-law says. He's a doctor, and he says lawyers see people at their worst, and lawyers see people at their worst, priests see people at their best, and doctors see people the way they really are. And I often wonder, what's it like to go into a business? First of all, what do you go in and you say, listen, everyone knows this is probably dead, or maybe needs some help, and you're the guy there to make the decision? Were there any, surely with your family background in business, it must have been quite heartbreaking to have to do that emotionally for yourself?
Definitely. And just part of my experience, I didn't even reference working in receiverships. Obviously, the era that we were in, we were going into hotel groups and in all industries, literally everyone. But to give an example on one that comes to mind when you ask your question, a hotel. I remember going in, it was a family-run hotel, really good business. They tried to grow. There was a lot of government incentive grants around that time. They were trying to expand. And the business that they had was a very viable business, but the business they tried to grow to, they couldn't keep up with the payments. So the hotel that they were running got into trouble, not because of the hotel itself, but because of the external investments. And that was really hard. You're coming into a family-run, a husband and wife with a couple of kids working there, and you're the bad guy going, look, there's no one to blame here, but we're put in there by the banks to try and help turn around and make it a viable business, or maybe it gets sold on, or there's a load of different methodologies. But there was one specific hotel I'll always remember it. And I remember one woman behind reception, and she stopped me. I was dressed up in my suit and everything, and she's like, oh, do you like being the big man and coming in and you're breaking people's hearts, you're like taking people out of jobs? And so it was like, as you said, I grew up in family business. I know what it's like to, like, for my parents, the responsibility you have when you're hiring people, and it's people's livelihoods and their families. A lot of people have young kids, etc. I have a 2.5-year-old myself, so I know it even more now. But that was a really hard one, and my biggest thing was like try and build a bridge with her and say, look, my job is not, I don't want people to lose jobs. My job is to turn this back into a viable business. So we have to do things that are probably not liked, but our last resort was always to lay off people. It was literally everything we can do to make this as viable as possible in the business side. Try and leave the people at home, keep people in jobs, leave people alone, keep people in jobs. So like when I explained that to her, she, okay, I get it now. Because you just come in and you're the big bad wolf. And I remember reading stuff in the papers, and we sitting in the hotel and you're reading about us coming in, because obviously the national papers. And yeah, like it was hard at 100%, especially those smaller, not smaller companies, but like family run, where it's literally been in the family 40, 50, 60 more years or whatever. And then you're the ones coming in to try and clean up. But yeah, like it was brilliant. So my biggest thing is like, build that common bridge, explain it, and say people know you're here to help, not to try and burn it down. Like we could see the business is good.
Yeah, I mean, that always strikes me as the really tough part about being on the finance team. Sometimes when there's good news, everyone takes the credit themselves, right? When the sales are going well, the sales team are the heroes and the marketing teams are amazing and so on. But suddenly, if it goes the other way, for some reason, people blame them. What is that success? A thousand fathers, mother only one, failure only one mother. Yeah, that must be really tough. So you skipped, that was interesting. But now let's get into the meat of, because your challenge at Twilio, like for sure, people may not have heard of Twilio, but when I was growing up as a young programmer, Twilio were a cool startup, and they were what I would imagine like Stripe is to payments. They were that for telephony at the time when I saw them first. So it was me as a programmer, I could write their API and I could just spin things up. And it was a genius move because just the way Stripe did it, and maybe actually Stripe might have been inspired by Twilio, which was that you just give the low-level programmers, the junior guys, the APIs and the ability to build stuff. And of course, when people ask them to build it, what are they going to do? They're going to use the stuff that's easy to use. And there was no real sales force involved at that stage, as far as I know. It was product-led growth, and it was absolutely explosive. By the time you got there, what were the big challenges from a finance perspective? A lot of times these companies make it to surprisingly large scale with surprisingly little process. And then when did you come in? And let me give you the big bones of what you had to achieve in your time there.
Yeah, as you said, these companies can grow so quickly. And like Twilio's, I could spend 20 minutes talking to you about Jeff Lawson, the founder and CEO. Like to give one little anecdote of how amazing business and life can be, like this guy sold his wedding presents to fund the company. So we got to go for dinner with him. He came over to the Dublin office, and I was lucky enough to be a part of a small group to get to sit down with him, have dinner inside in Dublin city centre, have a couple drinks with him. And he just regaled us with anecdotes that you literally wouldn't believe how trivial they sound, but how they had such sliding doors moments for him in the company, and how it grew from there. But like he literally sold his wedding presents, had to sit down with his wife. He had set up tech companies in the past and they struggled, and then he was doing photography for weddings, and he had this idea, had people that he knew, and he was an engineer background as well. He came from, had a lot of experience in Amazon, and having to sit his wife down and say, look, we're going to sell all our presents to fund this idea. And it's a crazy whim when you think back, and like literally the ideas. And there was a pizza box, and there's a photo of the pizza box. Him and a guy were in a hotel, and they wrote down the 10 ideas of Twilio on a pizza box. So that's a picture in the office of a company that has $4 billion of revenue. So it's funny how small things can grow so big, etc. as well. So that's a little bit that I learned from meeting Jeff himself. But yeah, like you said, the company grew so quickly during that time, and I joined, and it was going through a lot of growth, but it had $1 billion revenue in its sites, but it still felt it was at 650 the year before, and it was like 1 billion seemed like such a big deal. And he was like, oh, I see 1 billion, I see 10 billion, I see, like the typical CEO, they promise huge things, and he was making promises. And like obviously in an accounting department, your job is to deliver and not be in the way of a business that's growing. You can't be the ones that are stopping a business growing. As you said, the finance and accounting team, you don't want to be the ones that are blamed for it. If sales are growing, you need to get out of the way and be able to handle it. So yeah, the biggest thing I would have taken away from there was how to scale teams quickly, and when you're hiring people, how to hire the right people at the right times, and how to create that culture of growth, but also process improvement and leveraging like methods like lean methods and Six Sigma, etc., as well to scale teams, etc. Because like when you're growing at the scale they grew, it's so easy to just bolt on teams, people, everything, and then the processes don't get lean at all, and then you just end up with these overly complex processes that can really impact how quickly the company grows.
So by the time you left, there were 250 people odd in the accountancy function there, or the finance function, from a very low base. And I guess it's very easy to fall on your face while you're doing that. So we touched on Six Sigma there. Maybe we just better explain briefly, how does that help you in achieving that sort of growth or organizing while you grow?
I can reference, I suppose, a big example in Twilio where we were growing so quick we needed to move ERP, and we were moving from NetSuite to Oracle because the company was scaling so quickly. And one of the big process changes that was required during that time was the way we accounted for our revenue was going to change drastically. Net allowed a daily sync from our billing platform, and Twilio was a usage company, so you can imagine there's billions of lines, and the task kept bolting on and getting bigger and bigger. But when we moved to Oracle, that meant we could only upload the revenue numbers once. When they were all locked in, there was no more moving pieces. That's quite challenging when you've billions of dollars of lines and currencies and time zones and all of the complexities of a global company. And the like Six Sigma and lean methods, etc., or like I referenced the people, process and technology, PPT, in terms of categorizing how to solve problems, in terms of, is it first P is people, is it, do you have the right people, do you have enough people, do they have the right skill set, experience, etc. Processes, looking at the process itself in terms of, is it like we mentioned, is it a lean process? Is it just a really bulky, time-consuming process? Is it sequenced correctly? Sequencing is really key in a global company. Like in Twilio, we had the billing process crossed 5 main time zones. It was 14 different teams to get an invoice out to a customer. That process bulked up to 71 steps. It used to take us 7 business days to do.
We'll get on to the process now in a minute, but I have a question just to zoom in on what you said about scaling that team, because oftentimes when I'm in a meeting and we're like, we need to get something done, and it doesn't take long before someone says, oh yeah, we need to get someone for that. Like we need a resource, we need a whatever. But sometimes you could do that and it's a step backwards. So how do you identify when you really need more resource, or you just, because it's the easy thing to say as well, we need someone for that, but or when there's a process change or something else needs to change to get more from your existing team?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, to be honest, it's as simple as it sounds, write it all down. I think that was the biggest thing. There's a method called the 4 stages to mastery, or 4 stages of learning, and you don't know what you don't know until you've it all written down. And that was the biggest part. And I mean, like, write down the task, the time it takes, estimated time, the people, and get that visual of even like a process workflow map where you can see, okay, step 1 maps step 2, step 3, and understanding the dependencies and understanding that, and then looking at that and seeing how lean you can make that process. Or is it actually you need people? You don't have enough people in the right time zone. That was a challenge for us. Sometimes we didn't have the right people to do the process to make it as lean as possible. When you're passing tasks between a team in Dublin, a team in India, a team in the US, that gets really hard if you maybe the team that handles certain information in Dublin isn't big enough, etc. as well. The biggest part is actually understanding your process and making sure you understand where that's lean, etc. as well, and even the systems that fall part of that as well. Do you have the right skill set of people who can leverage those systems? Sometimes people are very good, but they're maybe not as good as you need them to be at automation, etc., and are getting upskilled on new systems. And you need to, like, that's where you need to have the right people in those seats to make sure you're optimizing it, basically.
Yeah. So what I heard there was it actually takes intellectual vigor to write it down. Like sometimes it's easier to skip that step. So I recently reached out to someone for some advice on our marketing, and she came back to me saying, write it all in a document, and having written it down, let me know if you still need my help. And of course, I wrote the document and I was like, oh, it's obvious now that I've written it down. But it was harder to do that than just ask for someone for help. Yeah. So getting it down. Okay, where are we going now then? Let's go a little bit into it. So in your example there, you were moving from NetSuite to Oracle, which is a big change. And then you had, what was the actual upload? Were them ups happening manually, or what were they? It's a lot of people for a team. So why did you need so many people? You'd think would all be just connected together on a computer database somewhere at this stage.
Yeah, you'd think that. So like the why of we needed so many people, I don't know why. It was all like, it was an area I wasn't involved in. My job was overseeing the record to report role. That meant my role was to make sure Twilio was on the stock exchange. I had to make sure we were as optimized as possible in getting the numbers out to the stock exchange. So obviously moving ERP, everything took longer. What was a 20 business day process bulked up to 27. But like that was involving so many different teams in terms of billing engineers, you had accountants, you also, if you think of revenue, you had tax element as well. So you had like tax engineers, but also tax accountants. So you had all these people with pieces having requirements of pieces of the pie. They were built all separately. And this is a process that's only done in the first week or so of the month. So the why it bulked up, I think it's just the nature of fast growing company. It's easier to throw resources at it, especially a company that's doing well in terms of growth. Like cash wasn't an issue for Twilio, etc. either. So pumping money into headcount to make sure that you're able to do this wasn't a big deal. But obviously that's not really sustainable in the long run. So my job was to come in as a complete outsider, literally knew nothing about the process, was aware of it, obviously, but not, and had a high level understanding of, okay, what was the last task that needed to be done before we get into the month-end close numbers. So yeah, my job is to come in with fresh eyes and actually basically poke around and be that annoying guy of who's asking why. Okay, why do we do this? Or why there were some tasks that were so trivial for this company of Twilio side to do. Okay, that's an impediment to us getting this done. It used to take 7 days. With using those asking why and poking around, understanding it and leveraging FloQast as well. FloQast, a big part for me that I got the team onto FloQast was brilliant for getting those sign off that I could see James has a task due on day 4, but James actually signs it off on day 2. And like, okay, so I thought that task was dependent on Jason's task, who's based in India, etc. And it's until literally what you said, the write it down, until you've written down and you can actually start seeing things, you go, okay, I thought this was a dependency. And I was able to play dumb and ask why. Why is it a dependency if James has done it already? Is it actually a dependency, or can we just get James to do that day 2 every month, move that up? And you start moving the steps around and the sequencing. People get so embedded in this is the way we do it. When you're growing quickly, you don't question it. You just do it. Everyone does the same thing month over month and don't question it. And especially when you're dealing with the volume of people as well, and across continents even.
So you were using FloQast before you even left Twilio. So maybe you could just, it's a good time to talk about how FloQast sounds great. To me as a programmer, it sounds like a way of programming people into a system, but maybe that's maybe that's my wishful thinking because people are a bit messier than that. But what made it stand out against the other tools available to you at the time?
Yeah. I could talk so much about it because I leveraged it for 4 years and it became my gospel every day, morning, afternoon and evening. If you think about my role, being in Dublin would not have been possible without a FloQast. So like a lot of teams and my previous companies, we would have leveraged Google Sheets to track tasks. In Twilio's month end, we'd circa 6,000 or more tasks to do on a month end, spread across 250 people across the world. Me going to sleep at night probably would not have happened if I'm trying to manage that in a Google Sheet or a workaround tool. Whereas FloQast it's that centralized home for everything that the accounting team needs to do. For me, I could get analytics of like, how are we doing? Where's the fire? So FloQast allowed me to manage by exception. Instead of trying to go, okay, where are we at with 6,000 tasks? I could go isolate by different angles depending on what I wanted to see and see where, okay, I need to come in and help the team, etc. as well. It really helped in terms of that visibility, but also accountability of we had business goals to hit a certain amount of days. And on a high level, I mentioned earlier, 20 business days to file, but also we'd sub goals and sub milestones to even reach their general ledger lock was like business day 7. All reconciliations have to be done by business day 15, 5 days before the filing. So the technical accounting team have 5 clear days to do their work. FloQast really kind of helps me map out that and understand like where's our challenges, etc. as well.
Sure. So first of all, then FloQast is aimed for enterprise customers, or what's the sort of smallest and biggest customer that it would be useful for?
It literally is everyone. So it started out, it definitely would have been in the SMB side, and as the company has grown, so FloQast is around quite a while now, but it fits kind of everyone, and the packages are tailored to your size of company, your needs, etc. as well. So like we sell to companies like Twilio, which are obviously into the billions of dollars of revenue, but also there's non-profit companies, there's like very small companies that leverage it as well. And people take what they need themselves. You can tailor the packages depending on what you need. Yeah. Not everyone is going to need a technical accounting tracking part, etc., or consolidations, or there's a lot of elements that certain companies don't need. So you don't buy what you don't need. So yeah.
And there's a lot of workflow tools out there, but FloQast seems to be specialized specialized for controllers, CFOs? What are the features that make it more suitable than a generic workflow management tool or process tool?
One of the biggest things is that there's a diagnostic element in FloQast. So obviously, if you look at month-end close, it's basically a recurring project that happens 12 times a year. So say a lot of the same work. It bulks out a little bit more at your quarter ends or your year ends, etc. as well. But it's a lot of like quite repetitive work. FloQast allows teams manage everything in there. They can manage the frequency of the task. They can manage who's the assignee, the due date, etc. as well. So you get that full purview of like when items are due. You can also add in like your estimated time and your dependencies to get an understanding of how long does the task take. Not all tasks are created equal. A lot of those tools like treat a task as a task, but like you could have a reconciliation that takes 5 minutes, or you could have a reconciliation that takes 5 hours. And without that visibility, you would struggle. The biggest part is the analytics, though, as well, for unlocking those key insights of where do you make process improvement. James, we met at the World Finance Forum, and automation and AI is just everywhere, literally everywhere. But the biggest problem that teams and leaders struggle with is like, what do I automate? Why do I need to automate it? And like the analytics that FloQast is able to give you, it shows you your trends of what's your sign-offs, what are your recurring late tasks, what are your, maybe if it's people, or is James always signing off on these 10 tasks late by 5 days for the last 10 months in a row? So you get these insights, so you go, okay, we should change that. Is it a due date issue? Is it inputs and outputs? You're an engineer. Like what you build is based on your inputs. If the due date is wrong, that's an input issue. So we're setting James up for failure straight away if we're saying it needs to be done on business day 5, but in reality it's business day 8. So it bubbles up a lot of those, and you can capture within review notes as well of here's the problem that happened this month. And then you can start building up that visibility rather than having disconnected and disparate communication methods. We used to have 45 minutes to an hour calls every single day to go through our progress. Because of FloQast, we could keep it to, I changed the call to 15 minutes max. And in reality, it's probably 5 to 7 minutes because it was looking through FloQast going, okay, here's where we're at. Here's the problem areas. Is there anyone have anything else? If not, here's your time back. That's very powerful for leaders. And when you're talking of probably about 50 leaders on that call alone, giving them 45 minutes or more back in their day, no one's going to be unhappy with that. Everyone loves a call that's shorter than you expected. Wow. So like that part is just so key. It shows you where you need to go. So in my role, I had to save time and make processes more lean. And that really guided me in terms of if you set it up the right way, you can really be guided on where's your problem areas, where do you need to bring in automation. And like FloQast also has a lot of automation tools available as well, but you can bring on what you need. And that's where like the analytics part showed me we had an issue on amortization recs. FloQast had more, like they were time consuming and they just fell at a difficult time in a month in terms of resourcing. We were able to bring in the automation side, which freed up the team, and it just totally unlocked probably a day just on that change alone. But it was the analytics that pointed me towards, okay, here's a problem. Okay, we can actually add an automation element in here. But within 2 to 3 months, you're like, oh yeah, no, that's working seamlessly. And you're just moving on to the next part, etc. as well. So a cool part is it's very accounting led as well. It's quite easy to use, and they have engineers who are ex-accountants, which is unique. There's quite a high percentage of the company are ex-accountants. The CEO, the chief product officer, they're all my connections in the company because I built up a good rapport with them. They're all like ex-accountants. So they get it because they've been there at 10 o'clock at night, pulling their hair out going, why am I doing this? And that's a really key part. You're not relying on IT teams.
Right.
Roll everything out because they've got so many other priorities as well that you might get high on the list.
I can see straight away. I can think of times where sometimes in a leadership position you set off a chain of dominoes you weren't aware of. Sometimes there's a process happening and then it's not happening on time and you're like, why is this taking longer? And then you realize, no, there are 4 other people that got brought into this process you never knew about. You're like, I didn't even know that was happening. And if I'd known, I wouldn't have asked for it in the first place. I didn't realize what I was doing. So it just clarifies and brings it all out. I can see it, not just accountancy. I can see that in all sorts of tasks. But of course, there's that relentless month-end, board meetings. By the time you get to the SEC, I guess it's a whole nother level. So there's an increasing pressure there. So let's talk a little bit about you've mentioned that your accountancy is in the DNA of FloQast by the sounds of it, and you're not in an accounting seat anymore. You've moved over to marketing. So I'm fascinated by people who make a switch. First of all, what motivated you to do that? Are you prepping for the big job someday, moving around the company, doing different departments, or what was your motivation? Because it gets pretty comfy at the top there, at the top of your perch on the finance team, I would imagine, and a pretty big risk to take a jump into something you might be terrible at, let's face it.
Yeah. If you told me 2 years ago, 5 years ago that I would end up in marketing, I would think, okay, James, you need to put away whatever you're taking, because I just didn't see it. But it was an opportunity that I felt I had to go for. One, the opportunity didn't really even exist. This all started from me sending the CEO, Mike Whitmer, and the CPO, Chris Sluty, an email, cold email. Accountants don't do cold emails, but basically said, guys, I'm leaving Twilio. I'd love to work with you. I think what you're doing is really good, and I'd love to have a call about it. So literally did a reach out. The guys gave me like 45 minutes, an hour of their time to chat to them. I'd previously spoke at their annual conference as well as a customer, so I'd been given good opportunity with them, because they loved the story. One, they loved the Twilio story because how the company grew. Twilio was with FloQast since 2015, and they've seen Twilio grow with FloQast, and FloQast symbiotic. So there was something about the company and the people, and we had a customer success manager, Brittany Shaw, and we just hit it off, and I got to work with a lot of engineers. We got to be in all the alpha and beta testing of new products. So I was one of the early viewers of a lot of their products, and I could see stuff before it even hit the market and give them feedback. And there was just something about the culture from the outside. You're like, I really like where they're going. They're a private company based from LA. They're trying to build a brand in EMEA, etc. as well. They have an office in London. And there was just something about the people that I'd met. Like, I'd probably met 50 to 100 people in my time before I even joined FloQast, in every role, from marketing people, if I was speaking on a webinar, the annual conference, to some of the C-suite, as I mentioned, customer success people, engineers. So you got a bit of a full gambit of the people who are there, and it just resonated a lot with me. It's very unique in terms of, as you said, the accounting DNA, such a high percentage of people who are accounting. You see a lot of like controllers, audit managers, auditors in FloQast, and they're doing sales jobs. They're doing a bit of everything. And there was something about that really excited me. Like, people know the finance path. You just follow way up the lead, and then eventually you might become CFO, potentially CEO. All this, and it's like a fairly worn path. And I felt this was just such a unique opportunity to do something so different that it was like, roll the dice and see. You're only going to learn. It's going to make me more broadened in terms of my experience. It's going to build up a commercial element that you probably don't really get exposure to as much in the accounting side. You need to do your job, or somebody might go to jail, rather than going, okay, helping grow the company, etc. as well. And it was a really unique opportunity, and I felt that adding that really in-depth commercial element was brilliant. But also there was a safety element of marketing to accountants. So like, having that part was a real thing of, okay, I know what I'm looking for, and I know from working with accounting leaders for my whole career of what they're looking for. We've obviously touched on some of the key points that I think of in terms of business, etc. as well. So I felt that was a key part, and some of the opportunities I was getting was to work with it as a subject matter expert on a really broad range of accounting topics, getting on the ground of like new AI technology that FloQast is building, and being in it really early stages, giving feedback on it. If I like to look at something, if I don't like to look at something. So it gave me a bit of everything. So there's work with engineers and work with marketing people, sales people, a bit of everything. And I felt like it was just a really unique opportunity that to be honest, I created for myself because of the cold email, but it felt like something I had to try, because accounting is always there for me. I know I could always go back, and that's the safe route. It's the known path. But with this, like yourself, when you're starting out with Procurement Express, you don't know where it's going really, but it's just the opportunities is so unique, because if you didn't try it, it felt like I might be regretted in 20 years. Like, why didn't you try it? You could have. The accounting was there for you anyway. So yeah, that's a little bit of the background.
I think there's a big lesson there. I tell people I'm the wrong type of nerd. I'm building software for finance teams, but I'm a programmer. So I always have that insecurity about me. And it must be great to be able to just know the language. I always feel still, every time I have to mention a ledger or accrual, I'm like, well, I hope I'm using it right now, and so to have that is great. And then the second thing is my first business success was I started dating my now wife, and she worked in advertising, and the two of us came together to run a side hustle that eventually turned into a business. It was actually a voiceover agency, weirdly. And it was the crossing the streams, so to speak, like the two different experiences. When you bring them together, that's what unlocked success. Before it was always falling on my face. Maybe there was a hint there in taking that game of golf with Christy O'Connor Jr. before you're leaving cert. That ability to take a bit of a leap has paid off. So
possibly. Can I just add there as well, James, on that? Accountants are quite cynical people of marketing, especially. They want to work it out for you want to work it out for yourselves. Marketing is obviously big on telling you what you're going to gain from something, whereas accountants like that. They don't want too much information on a page where numbers, guys. And I felt that was a big part that I could add as well, that guys don't write big blurbs. A CFO of a company is not going to read it. They don't have time to read 10 pages about a product. They need to know some of the highlights, and then they'll drill into it if you resonate. Also numbers. If you're not putting numbers on a page, whatever marketing content for an accountant, you're losing it straight away because it's just all words. We're not used to words. We're used to sitting in numbers. So you need to see some numbers that kind of help build a visual of, okay, now I get it. Yeah. And that, I think that gave me added to the safety net of, okay, I know what they like. So if you can strip it back and kind of use lean methods again, like that minimalism almost view of, you don't need to write huge long blurbs. You can actually keep it quite simple, but hit the key points for people.
Okay, I'll take that to heart, actually, when I'm doing. I'm just thinking about how we're explaining our product. But let's wrap up now with before we do that, I'll just ask, how can people get in touch with you, or if they want to find out more about FloQast, what's the best way to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, like I suppose personally, I'm obviously set up on LinkedIn. I'm sure we can share LinkedIn links as well. And then FloQast, there's a FloQast website. FloAcademy also exists as well, where free CPE and free CPD exists for people, for non-customers as well. So you can join on there and sign in on webinars. I speak on quite a lot of webinars myself on a broad range of topics. So I'm sure we can add some links into the description to guide people to the right place. So yeah, they'd be the two main resources.
Yeah, and that's FLOQAST, American spelling, for if you're listening to this. And then, all right, now I have my rinky-dink question to finish up here, which is, who is your business hero and why?
Yeah, probably a cheesy one, but I would say it's my mother. Both my parents, I suppose, in a way, because I grew up with them in business. I referenced it earlier, from the age of 8 or 9. I think the biggest part was my mother. Me and my two brothers are unique in terms of we got to work in a tiny office that's a lot smaller than most people work from home offices these days, and get to learn how to run a business, how to manage people, how to make phone calls, which is quite challenging when you're 12 years old, ringing these big businessmen, either asking for money if you're collecting debtors, or ringing up looking at a vendor to solve a problem you have, or the petrol station, the pumps are broken down, you need to solve it, and you're 12 years old trying to work it out because your mother goes, it's on you to solve it. She would give you that responsibility. So I think that she would definitely be the biggest one. She was big on building connections with people and building up that respect with people and connecting people on a human level. And I love it when I go home and I meet people who worked for her. Everyone always says, oh, you were the best manager I ever had, because she was very fair. If you did your job, you can like my mother loves having fun, and like in a small business, you want people who have a bit of personality and character. It adds an element to it. I think that was a big part, and she always made sure to show gratitude to people as well. And if you treated her and the business, she treated you well. And if you needed to go for some whatever reason on a day, or you needed extra time in holidays, she was always very facilitating of that. And she just built up really good connections. And like being an active listener is something that she's brilliant at. My father is the same. He led a team of 30 people in Kerry as well while working for Ayr, which is no mean feat being a Cork man when Cork are often getting beaten by Kerry.
Baseball there, yeah. Two neighbouring counties who are, let's say, competitive to say the least.
Yeah, and I learned so much from her. And I mentioned the billing exercise earlier. One big job we had to do in the office was get the invoices out for the customers of the petrol station. So you're talking a lot of local businesses. And the biggest thing we had to do was, she would always stress, is the timeliness. The invoices will be done on the 30th or 31st of the month. The sooner we get them out, the 1st, the 2nd, etc., the quicker we get paid. If you leave that for a week or so, the customers are going to take their 30 days credit terms and you're going to be delayed. So cash flow is really key at that level. So even something as simple as that at a petrol station in West Cork, that methodology stuck to me when I was applying it in Twilio. Okay, we're delaying when we're getting paid, and this is in the billions of dollars compared to sometimes you're talking hundreds of euro or thousands of euro, etc. as well. So those, like, I learned so much during that time as a 8, 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old, spending my summers working in a small office. And yeah, like, I just learned so much that to this day, business is quite simple. It's about people, etc. as well. And try not to complicate it is one of the biggest things I took from her.
As you say that, I'm wondering if I gave my 11-year-old son a stack of accounts receivable invoices, how he get on. Maybe he might do quite well at it, actually. He's quite direct. I don't know. Maybe I'll give that a go. But it sounds crazy, but maybe it'll work. So does your mother know she is your business hero?
No, I'm sure she will when she gets to watch this. I'm going to leave it as a surprise. I leave it unexpected. I had one funny thing on my mother as well. When I told her I was doing this podcast, she's like, "What are you going to talk about? Who's going to want to listen to you for an hour?" Like, people coming in listening from Ireland will only know that Irish mammies have a good way of bringing you back down to earth. I was ringing with pride saying, "Oh, I'm going to do a podcast with someone I met at the World Finance Forum," and straight away that was her first go-to. I'm like, so yeah.
Well, there we go. Okay, let's prove Jason's mum. Well, let's make her proud by, if you're got to this far deep into the podcast, congratulations, you are among the elite listeners here. So leave a comment just to let us know that you've got the inside joke here, so Jason's mum can see how far we got. And also, your reward for getting this far is you can go to procurementexpress.com/partners. If you have background in finance, you'd like to find out more about how Procurement Express works. I've done a webinar there which tries to explain it in no nonsense terms. I talk about what we do from a finance perspective. Specifically, if you're a fractional CFO, you have earned the right to sign up for that. Congratulations. Jason, this is pretty good. I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours easily here, but we'll have to call it wraps. And thanks very much for coming on the show.
Same. Thanks very much for your time, James.